The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Hurricane Sandy has come and gone, fortunately. It almost missed us completely, Lewis, I have to say.
Yeah, some towns near us got hit pretty hard, but our town, not much at all.
Well, we are back live after missing the live stream yesterday. I want to say hi to everyone watching from the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page, also the We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama Facebook page. The worst storm ever in some areas, and it's fascinating because watching a lot of the coverage of Hurricane Sandy, I was struck by how a discussion of climate change and global warming was almost completely not there. Now, you could argue, well, we were really trying to get information they were trying to get information, important information to people that were affected. There's a million reasons why it wouldn't come up, and that would be perfectly fine. But at no point in the lead up or even now or later or after any time, we really need to be talking about, we have such a short period of time during which we have 200-year storms, and there's no discussion of climate change. Now, I'll admit that I don't know whether this is a cyclical thing and we're just in a part of the cycle right now where we have more extreme weather, or whether this is really a permanent change being brought on by human activity on Earth. The thing is, I don't want to take the chance that it's the latter, and I think we need to be doing everything to reduce the possibility that this is anything other than a cyclical climate change issue.
Right. It doesn't make sense to just dismiss this. I mean, we have to at least admit that there's a chance that we're causing this and that we can do something about it. If not, you're just being completely irresponsible.
Absolutely. And what do we know? We know global climate change has contributed to higher sea, surface, and ocean temperatures. We know that we have a warmer and moister atmosphere. We know that its effects are in the range of 5 to 10%. We also know that we're putting more carbon dioxide than ever into the atmosphere, and we have no point of reference because we did not have this level of industrialization at any previous point. So my view is, I don't know for sure, but I don't want to take any chances. And I got a lot of emails from people in New York, including saying, what would happen if the New York City electrical system was damaged by salt water rising high enough? And what if, and we saw that this happened a little bit, water getting into the subway system, but what if the entire electrical system of New York City was completely corroded by water? What if the sewer system of New York City were totally flooded? There's the potential, because that's not a city that's prepared with levees and so on and so forth. There's the potential for what could arguably be permanent effects in a place like New York City from these storms.
Right. So now will we see some effort to put in place safety provisions that will help with something like this in the future, or what's going to happen?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, what's your thought about this when you think about these storms, Natan, in the context of climate change?
Well, I think it's been a success by the right in this country to basically not discuss this seriously in the media. They've, had this false equivalency. They're trying to get the idea out that there's not a consensus in the scientific community about what's going on. And granted, this particular storm may or may not be a direct result of global warming, but certainly it should be a conversation that's had in the media.
To talk a little bit about Mitt Romney and tie him into this, my first instinct when we started talking about Hurricane Sandy was, why are people making it political? Let's not make this a political thing. And then I do realize that politics is a huge part of how storms like Hurricane Sandy are dealt with. And we can't ignore the fact that if Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan got their way, FEMA would be a thing of the past. Remember, this is video from 2011 during a debate just in the last year of Mitt Romney saying federal disaster relief like FEMA is immoral. Spending money on things like that is immoral. And he actually says in this video clip, what if we actually looked at privatizing absolutely everything we can? Privatizing hurricane relief. Take a look at what Mitt Romney had to say just months ago, really.
FEMA's about to run out of money, and there are some people who say do it on a case-by-case basis, and some people who say, maybe we're learning a lesson here that the states should take on more of this role. How do you deal with something like that?
Absolutely. Every time you have an occasion to take something from the federal government and send it back to the states, that's the right direction.
Right.
And if you can go even further and send it back to the private sector, that's even better. Instead of thinking in the federal budget, what we should cut, we should ask ourselves the opposite question. What should we keep? We should take all of what we're doing at the federal level and say, what are the things we're doing that we don't have to do? And those things we got to stop doing, because we're borrowing $1.6 trillion more this year than we're taking in.
Including disaster relief.
We cannot
Right, so
afford to
there's
do
Mitt
those
Romney.
things
That's
without
his idea
jeopardizing
of
the
what might
future
happen
for
there. It's funny because I don't even remember that Mitt Romney. Now I'm used to the Mitt Romney from the general election campaign, and he bears absolutely no resemblance to that Mitt Romney from the Republican primary. But putting that aside, privatize disaster relief altogether? What is Mitt Romney talking about? This is the wrong direction. We can't ignore the politics of this.
He's constantly talking about sending things back to the states. Never once mentions that most states are bankrupt themselves. Never mind the federal government borrowing money to do things. Most states are in a terrible situation.
No question about it.
And privatizing disaster relief?
The other thing also is when you talk about things like, there's another conversation to be had here also, which is an interesting one, and it gets really kind of into a libertarian train of thought, but it's a lot of the places where people have built homes and cities have been built are really not safe places. We've been talking about this in Florida for a really long time. And to a certain extent, people are starting to wonder, should we really, especially if climate change is going to continue going in this direction and keep taking back some of the coasts that have been built up, should people even be allowed to build homes in some of these areas? Kind of a completely different question, gets us into a whole other train of thought, including the libertarian ideals and so many other things. I'm not taking a position on this. I'm just saying it's another topic that is coming up as these storms continue.
And even then, a subtopic of that is the regulations for buildings being so lax in those areas,
right,
where, I mean, even the smallest storms can destroy these poorly built homes.
The Mitt Romney campaign, in an effort to create photo ops and stage all sorts of positive news for their campaign, actually got in the way. They were hindering and impeding relief from Hurricane Sandy. This is incredible. The Romney campaign, remember, first Mitt Romney promised to shut down FEMA. That was last year. Back to this year, Team Romney decided they were going to do some token hurricane relief by collecting and gathering supplies for hurricane relief. That's all well and good. It sounds fine. Except that's actually the opposite of what hurricane relief experts say you should be doing. They say, when you actually start collecting supplies, especially in such a short amount of time before the storm, those need to be processed, sorted, needs assessed, and then distributed. How are you going to do all that with the stuff Mitt Romney's collecting on his bus the day of the hurricane? Cash is what is needed. We know Mitt Romney's certainly not going to put any cash towards hurricane relief. He's putting all the cash he can get into TV ads that continue running, even though he says we shouldn't be doing politics during this time of need. So this is straight from the Red Cross website. Unfortunately, due to logistical constraints, the Red Cross doesn't accept or solicit individual donations or collection of items. Items such as food, clothing, shoes must be sorted, cleaned, repackaged, and transported, which impedes the valuable resources of money, time, and personnel. It's incredible. Wouldn't the Mitt Romney campaign, before doing this, which was just going to be a thing for to be politically advantageous, contact someone from the Red Cross, find out what they should be doing, and they would have been told, no. It's hours before landfall. We don't need you collecting shoes. They need to be sorted and packaged. You're hindering and impeding us from doing what we need to do. Obviously, Romney didn't care about that.
No, just like he doesn't care about the economy. I mean, I don't think he's going around asking financial experts, what he can do to actually help the economy. No, he says let's give everyone tax breaks and not cut any spending.
And get rid of FEMA, because
Right.
we should be privatizing hurricane relief and actually giving money to companies for helping people when there's
Right.
hurricane
We'll
relief.
cut PBS and disaster relief. That's what we'll cut.
Big Bird and FEMA is going to really fix the economy.
Right.
I was reading an article in the New York Times. This is a really interesting article about an island off the coast of Greece called, I don't know if it's pronounced Icaria or Icaria. It's a 99 square mile island. About just under 10,000 Greek nationals live there. It's about 50 miles or 30 miles off the coast of Turkey, which Lewis has visited. This is a fascinating place. The New York Times article actually starts by profiling an individual who was diagnosed with lung cancer 30, 40 years ago, something like that, 25 years ago. Told he had about 6 months to live. He said, you know what? Funerals are much cheaper in Icaria. I'm going to go out there. It'll be $200 for a traditional Icarian funeral in those dollars versus whatever it costs in the U.S. And I'll just, hang out there. And he went to Icaria, basically just spent his time in bed with his then elderly parents, and he started feeling better. And he ended up tending a garden. He ended up basically just getting better. And we know how anecdotally we hear about these stories of spontaneous cancer cures. Putting that aside, this individual's story was the catalyst in the New York Times to really look at Icaria and look at how they are one of the 3 areas in the world that's been identified as having a hugely disproportionate number of people who live into their late 90s and over 100 years old. And started looking into a lot of different things. And it really is fascinating. I encourage you, if you want to first start with the New York Times article. If you Google New York Times, and then the name of the article is The Island Where People Forget to Die. Google that, read the article, then check out Wikipedia about Icaria and read more about it. It's pretty interesting. In a half hour, you'll get a lot of information. What is going on this island that is making people live long? Part of it is lifestyle. People get up late. One of the few doctors on the island says he doesn't even open until 11 a.m. because nobody is getting up in time for that. People take naps. People are up pretty late. People work together. There's a lot. It's not a rich place. In other words, in a lot of areas there, it's subsistence level, right? People work together for farming what they need. There's some touristy type businesses, but on the whole, it's a place where people are really kind of living communally in a certain way. What about the diet? This is really what's being looked at. There's a few interesting things here. There's talk of a local mountain tea, which people drink there, Lewis, which is made of a number of dried herbs. And it's often had at the end of the day, almost like as an end-of-the-day cocktail. And it includes wild marjoram, sage, a type of mint tea, rosemary, and a drink made from boiling dandelion leaves and adding a little bit of lemon. This is thought to have a number of positive life expectancy qualities. Have you heard about this at all?
I've never heard of this particular drink, no.
Natan, are you familiar with this?
No, not at all.
Natan is into different herbs and different spices and all sorts of stuff. You think you might have heard of it. The other thing is, what are the eating habits from childhood on, right? Compared to in the U.S. and many other industrialized areas where we're having a lot of processed foods. We're having unhealthy meat, particularly meat that's been fed with grain and corn, even though the corn lobby will tell you that that's very, very healthy, so on and so forth. What is the diet there? Well, it's a variation of the Mediterranean diet. A lot of olive oil that hasn't been cooked or heated, vegetables, low in dairy except for goat's milk, which goat's milk apparently, Lewis, is also known to be particularly easy to digest and positive health benefits. Meat products, which are basically unprocessed and pretty limited. Moderate amounts of alcohol, including wine, which has been known to have some positive health effects. Homegrown potatoes and a lot of bean-type products, lentils, black-eyed peas, garbanzo beans, etc. Honey, local bread, and a lot of wild greens. So oftentimes, it's interesting, some of the local greens that they have there can have 10 times the antioxidants of red wine. So that's kind of the broad spectrum of what's going on there. As I read the article, I was reminded of the island of Pala in Aldous Huxley's book Island, which is a book a highly recommended book. I think I've actually recommended it on my book recommendations. What's your reaction when you hear something like this? There has to be something to this that goes beyond just genetics, because this individual who moved back, and again, this one guy may be one of these anecdotal, non-explainable examples, but he did live in the U.S.
Yeah, that one guy could be an anomaly, but we see this in places like Okinawa, right? And
women in Okinawa live very long. That's one of the 3 places on the list with this, actually.
Yeah, and there are certain places in the world where this happens, where people have specific diets that are incredibly healthy, and it just happens to work out that way, and they end up living very long lives.
Natan, what's your reaction when you hear something like this?
I mean, I think the takeaway message is that it's not any one thing. It's probably a combination of the Mediterranean diet, the herbal tea, living in the mountains and exercising more, everybody feeling like they're, probably the lack of inequality, economic inequality in that area might also be a part of it. People feel like they're a community. So it's probably a combination of things.
Fascinating stuff. I encourage you to check out the article, and also check out the bonus show. After this show ends, there's a whole other show which producer Lewis hosts and produces. You have to be a member to get that. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up. We're talking about pennies a day here, Lewis. Pennies a day.
That's it.
Big help to the David Pakman Show. We'll take a break. Plenty more after this. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. It's the only website allowed at producer Lewis's Krakatoa Metal Band concerts. Of course, other than the Krakatoa Metal Band Facebook page.
Naturally.
Today's new David Pakman Show member of the day, Stephen Duffy. It's great to say thank you to Stephen Duffy, relatively new David Pakman Show member. He's also got the David Pakman Show hoodie, which is reminiscent of the t-shirt which Lewis is wearing today, made from 100% recycled materials. How is that thing holding up, Lewis? Looks pretty comfortable.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Very, very comfortable.
Yes.
Absolutely. Is it more comfortable than one of those puffy coats?
That's tough. That's tough.
All right.
I don't know.
You know about Nate Silver, obviously from 538.com, which is one of the most detailed and, I would say, interesting to read polling election prediction websites. Nate Silver has a pretty good reputation. Nate Silver is a guy who has been, he's a New York Times statistician. He is, of course, doing extensive polling on the 2012 election and did in 2008. And it turns out that right-wingers may not like Nate Silver. A conservative pollster named Dean Chambers is saying we absolutely cannot trust Nate Silver's numbers. And do you know why we can't trust them? Because Nate Silver seems kind of gay, according to Dean Chambers. This is incredible. He has put out this investigative report where he basically says it's liberal bias all around. And why is that? Well, here it is. Here's exactly what he had to say. Nate Silver is a man of very small stature, a thin and effeminate man with a soft-sounding voice that sounds almost exactly like the Mr. New Castrati voice used by Rush Limbaugh on his program. In fact, Silver could easily be the poster child for the new Castrati in both image and sound. Nate Silver might be of average intelligence, but is surely not the genius he's made out to be. Lewis, if you talk in a voice that appears to be effeminate, and by the way, Nate Silver is openly gay, obviously we can't trust your poll numbers, much the same way we can't trust you to do anything or raise children, right?
This opens a lot of doors here.
I'm convinced. Can't trust Nate Silver. Now, what's funny is that this guy's website, Dean Chambers, is unskewedpolls.com. What's the current prediction on unskewedpolls.com? It says, quote, the updated definitive projection of the race, Romney wins 54% and 359 electoral votes. Now, Natan, you've been looking at these numbers extensively. What is the actual, based on not this individual, but based on an actual average of polls, how likely is it that Mitt Romney gets 54% of the popular vote and or 359 electoral votes?
Well, look, there's a number of polling aggregation websites that are taking an objective look at what the evidence says from mostly state polls, but also national polls. And of all of those, including Sam Wong's Princeton Election Consortium, Votomatic.com, there's a number of them. The HuffPost blog has one of them too. Nate Silver's is the most conservative.
Right.
He's giving Obama a 70, today I think it's 72 or 73% chance of winning.
Compared to Sam Wong, who's up at like 97%.
Exactly. So among all of the people who are looking at the evidence not in a partisan way, objectively as possible, Nate Silver is probably the most conservative, most favorable to Romney.
I think that this election cycle, Lewis, the discussions of pollsters have gotten the most politicized that I can remember. And it's probably not going to stop, especially now that we have so many factors of, cell phones is the often used one, but now is the Hispanic vote being considered correctly? Are changes in demographics and population being considered correctly? What is the bias and party affiliation? How is the likeliness of voting being considered? We will soon know, in a week, we will know which pollsters got it right this time around. I can only imagine that the pollsters who are way off, and somebody inevitably is going to be way off, right? Because we've got such disparate predictions, are no longer going to be taken seriously. At least I hope not.
Yes, maybe. But 4 years from now, people probably won't even remember.
You think so?
To be perfectly honest.
I don't know.
Let me make one further point on this whole thing.
Yeah.
Certainly this isn't the crux of the argument, but Nate Silver, Sam Wong, all these people that are really taking a good look at the evidence and making predictions based on them, their reputation is riding on this. They are not doing this with a partisan interest. If they get this wrong, their reputation is going to be on the line. And I can't say that for most of the pundits that are criticizing them. They're not going to lose their jobs or their reputations if they get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Great story that came out yesterday from Bloomberg News. We've been talking for a while now about what is going on with Mitt Romney's taxes. How is he keeping his tax rate even as high as it has been? One area of discussion has been that Mitt Romney filed one tax return for 2011, and that as soon as the election is done, he will file an amended tax return, which will actually show that he paid even less than the 14% taxes, which his tax return claims. Bloomberg News broke this story yesterday, indicating that Mitt Romney rented the Mormon Church's exemption to defer taxes for 15 years. This is incredible, Lewis. The Republican presidential nominee, who presumably will get close to half of the vote, maybe even more if he ends up winning, used a loophole to rent the Mormon Church's tax exemption status, which allows him to defer paying taxes for 15 years, according to a new report from Bloomberg News. They'd filed a Freedom of Information Act, which indicates that Mitt Romney set up a charitable remainder unitrust, CRUT, in June of 1996. That's right before Congress cracked down on the ability to use this loophole just in 1997, 1 year later. Here is the information straight from Bloomberg's Jesse Drucker. In this instance, Romney used the tax-exempt status of a charity, the Mormon Church, according to a 2007 filing, to defer taxes for more than 15 years. At the same time he is benefiting, the trust will probably leave the church with less than what the current law requires. So the Mormon Church is not even really getting much benefit out of this. The main benefit from one of these charitable remainder trusts is the renting from your favorite charity of its exemption from taxation. Incredible. The CRUT allows individuals to defer capital gains taxes on any profit from the sale of assets, including all those companies that Mitt Romney had a stake in through his investments at Bain Capital, all of his personal investments, etc., etc. It allows you to defer the capital gains taxes and receive a small upfront charitable deduction and a stream of yearly cash payments later on. Now, we don't want to blow this out of proportion. In 2001, the Mormon Church, in 2011, we are not talking about a huge fraction of Romney's income, right? Mitt Romney's $250 million fortune, this exemption is a small part of that.
Right.
But we need to be adding up all of these different things, including that he will likely amend his 2011 return, the fact that he's taking advantage of the Mormon Church, although maybe they don't consider it that, by using this rental of their tax exemption status. We have a lot going on here, Lewis. And of course, there's just so much to cover that a lot of the stuff just gets lost.
Think about how much of what we cover gets lost in the mainstream media.
Right.
Probably 80%.
And most of the stuff is not even being covered at all.
Right.
Romney to a business crowd. Mitt Romney has been caught on tape again. He is casting this election as this kind of black and white contest with President Obama, where President Obama is waging a war on business and economic freedom. And Mitt Romney, we now have audio of Mitt Romney saying that basically President Obama hates businesses. He was in a room with a bunch of business people. He was saying, Obama doesn't really like you. Here's the audio, which has now been uncovered by Mother Jones.
I'm convinced that if this president is reelected, the war on business and economic freedom will continue. I don't think the president likes you very much. If you're in business, I think he looks at you as a necessary evil.
Exactly. President Obama looks at business as a necessary evil. Now, Mitt Romney, on the other hand, sees 47% of the country as victims and dependent on government and doesn't care about them. But putting that aside, President Obama thinks businesses are evil. Obama hates businesses, like Mitt Romney says. I mean, look, all those for-profit health insurance companies that he handed 30 million new customers to through the Affordable Care Act, he clearly is a guy who hates business.
I don't understand how you can make such a blanket statement like that. Like, the president does not like businesses?
Yeah, of course he doesn't.
How is that even possible?
All those companies that make the drones that Mitt Romney, President Obama has been giving more business than ever to, and Mitt Romney would continue to in a way that is almost completely undifferentiated from Barack Obama. He sure hates those private businesses. Really, really hates them.
Perhaps Mitt Romney was being more specific as to the businesses represented in the room.
Specifically, the people that were there.
He was speaking to, and knowing Mitt Romney, that could very well be true.
Yeah. Who know? I would love to know who was in that room.
Right. I think it's fair to assume that the president does not want to eliminate businesses from the United States.
Well, that would be an interesting platform to run on for Romney.
It would.
Barack Obama would eliminate business. You know, it's not that crazy. When you say that he's a communist and that he believes in the government controlling the full means of production, that would kind of follow. So maybe it's actually an allusion to the communist meme.
Right. I go to the gas station at the end of the street. It's a government-run gas station.
Government runs that. You didn't build that. The government did. Mm-hmm. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Visit us on Facebook. Behind-the-scenes pictures, memes, all sorts of different stuff happening at Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We'll take a break. Next, Cenk Uygur will be on with us, and we'll talk to him about the election. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to The David Pakman Show.
Joining me is Cenk Uygur, host of The Young Turks at theyoungturks.com on Current TV. Cenk, great to have you. Let's talk about this election that's going on. Undecided voters. I'm reading articles saying undecided voters do not exist. It's merely a question of whether they will vote or not. I'm reading other articles that say, no. Undecided voters are this kind of, it's a group of people we should be almost kneeling to, putting them up on an altar, because they're really waiting until they have all the facts. What's your thought about what's going on with these so-called undecideds?
Well, I do believe they exist. I'm pretty sure of that. At the same time, I love that nonsense idea that these are the folks that should be revered because they're waiting for all the facts to come in. Come on, all those facts came in a long time ago. These are the guys who are clueless, who are like, what? Who am I voting for? And they're actually the ones that are most easily deceived. And that's what concerns me, because those are the guys that got inundated with political ads, and I'm afraid might mistake some of those for facts, which they clearly are not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that if you're still undecided, 6-7 days before the election, even after the election, you'll be undecided, or you'll say, I regret the vote I made, or something like that, right? I mean, we're just so close at this point, it's not making any sense to me.
Yeah. And look, we live in a bubble, you and I do, where we care a lot about politics, so we know all of the minutia. So it's hard for us to understand and relate to a guy who doesn't care about politics almost at all. I say almost because he cares enough to vote.
Right.
But he doesn't care enough to find out any of the necessary facts until a week before the election. And then we hope for the best that he's found out the real facts, right? And so it's hard to understand what goes through his mind, and I think a lot of pundits BS about those voters. Well, I mean, are you kidding me? Turn on TV and watch that BS flow through like a flood. And those are the same guys that say, oh my God, these independent, undecided voters, they're like the greatest Americans. So look, unfortunately, what's happened, and I know we're going to talk about this more later, is that the media has colored everything so that everything's 50-50. If you actually had the real facts, this isn't even close to 50-50. And I say that as a guy who was very disgruntled about President Obama. Having said that, Mitt Romney would be an obvious disaster. Anyone who had a scintilla of an idea of what was going on in current day American politics would never consider voting for Mitt Romney.
All right, well, let's talk about that, because right now I'm getting a lot of the same messages you're probably getting from people saying, all of a sudden, David Pakman Show, Sam Cedar, the Young Turks, you guys are all just in the tank for Obama. I thought this was like critical journalism. You guys were actually talking about, well, real progressive, so on and so forth. My explanation is very simple. It's, listen, for the last 3 years, I've been talking about all the things President Obama's doing wrong and why he's not progressive enough. Right now, realistically, it's Obama or Romney. We have a week left, and Romney would be disastrous compared to Obama. On November 7th, I'm going back to what we were doing before. I don't know about you.
No, I've decided I'm just going to stay in the tank for Obama.
Oh, okay. All right. So we are doing different things. Okay.
Okay. Are you kidding me? Look, as soon as President Obama's reelected, which I think he will be, he's going to go back to being the right-winger that he is. He's going to pass that grand bargain. I'm going to hate it because it's going to rob the American middle class. He's conservative in his bones. So I got no love for Obama whatsoever. But if you say, here's a guy who you've got a lot of issues with, versus a guy who's monstrous, okay, and his policies are, and I'll get into that in a second, well, okay, then I got to make the lesser of two evil choice. And people hate that. And they say, no, you shouldn't do it. No. That's ridiculous. Look, if that's all you're doing, then you're right. That's not good enough, right? But you have to have a long-term, mid-term, and short-term strategy. The long-term strategy is you got to get money out of politics. Otherwise, we're screwed on every issue. Anybody who doesn't understand that money in politics is the Rosetta Stone, whichever side the money is on is going to be the side that wins, doesn't understand a thing about current American politics. So that's the long-term goal, and you got to fight really hard for that. In the midterm goal, you should have Democratic primaries, and the Progressive Change Campaign Committee does a great job with this. You got to run progressives in the primaries so that you don't have to vote between the lesser of two evils, between an insane Republican and a corporatist Democrat. You should vote for progressives in the primaries. Now, in the short term, look, you got to make a realistic choice. And if Mitt Romney's elected, he would cut taxes on the rich by 20%, get rid of the estate tax, cause tremendous economic inequality, almost certainly create another economic collapse, and the list goes on, let alone the war in Iran, et cetera.
And we can't forget Obamacare.
In the short term, you just got to make that call.
We can't forget the Obamacare factor. He would try to get rid of it. Of course, we're talking about millions of people who now have health care. We're talking about people that would die.
And let alone the Supreme Court. So when you sum all that up, it's a no-brainer. As much as I don't like President Obama's policies, as much as I don't think he's a progressive, well, compared to the disaster that awaits us if Mitt Romney's elected, of course you vote for Obama. That's not being in the tank for Obama. That's being honest with your audience as to what your real choices are in the short term while you fight for justice in the long term.
Speaking of honesty, before we move on, the controversy over the polls right now, we're seeing websites like 538.com, Nate Silver's website, also Princeton's Sam Wong, election.princeton.edu, saying, look, if we look at the numbers honestly, this is a very high probability of an Obama re-election. At the same time, you've got others like Rasmussen, you've got the Gallup tracking poll, and you've got some right-wing pollsters saying you're being deceived by these pollsters. What's your thought on all the polling controversy?
Yeah, look, I've dove into the polls. I do it every single day. I look at as many polls as there are. I'm obsessed because that's our job, is to know what's going on. And right now, when you look at the totality of the polls, any one poll could be way off in favor of President Obama or against President Obama, right? As I believe Rasmussen and Gallup are way off. They're outliers. They've been wrong in the past. They're wrong this time. But when you look at the totality of the polls, President Obama still has a 95% or greater chance of being in the lead today, not on election day, but today, a week out, in Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nevada. If he wins those 4 states, forget everything else, along with the ones that are solidly blue, he has 277 electoral votes and wins the election. 95% chance of winning those states and winning the election 7 days before the election, I'd take that any day. If I'm on the Romney side, I'm nearly despondent at this point.
Or you're doing this Karl Rove tactic of overconfidence, right, to appeal to those people who just want to be on the winning side in the end, which is really what they're doing right now.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think the media that feeds into it is doing a disservice to the truth. And they do it partly because they love the gamesmanship of it, and partly because as you look at the national polls, you can't blame them for saying, oh my God, it looks like they're absolutely tied in the national polls. But come on, if you're actually in this business, like, for example, the other day, Joe Scarborough said he would be shocked if Obama won. Well, I'm shocked you're still on TV if you're that bad an analyst. I mean, you don't understand the difference between national popular vote and the electoral college vote? You can't read the polls? You can't read the aggregate polls? I mean, how bad are you at your job?
All right. Positive words from Cenk Uygur. We've been speaking with Cenk Uygur, host of The Young Turks. Check it out at theyoungturks.com. Also on Current TV. Cenk, great as always to talk to you.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show, mostly supported by individual members. Please go to davidpakman.com/membership and sign up today to support the show. I know, Louis, at this point, you've got like a membership for every resident of Massachusetts or something, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's like, what, 3 million?
No, it's way more than that.
Is it?
Let's talk about Lewis thinking only 3 million people live in Massachusetts.
How many people is it?
Is it 9 or 12, Natan?
I think it's almost 7.
Almost 7. Very good. Yeah. So none of us.
Both of you got it right.
Listen, I see plenty of people walking around all the time. It's got to be millions. That I know.
Right.
There was a World Oncology Forum of some kind. I don't know if that's actually the name of the meeting, but that aside, it was a group of oncologists from all over the world who got together to talk about progress on cancer research and finding a cure for cancer. And it turns out that the consensus is that progress against cancer is actually stalling, in part because there is a strong push for profits, according to the doctors that are actually at the ground level on this. The latest targeted cancer drug, so to back up, several years ago there was the idea that there was going to be a new series, a new type of cancer drugs, which would very specifically target specific cancer cells and basically evaporate or dissolve the cancer. Progress on those has stalled, and that was really where a lot of the cancer experts a few years ago thought the future was going. And this hasn't happened. Instead, those therapies have brought a few extra months of life, but they're not drastically changing the outlook for a lot of types of cancer. And Douglas Hanahan of the Swiss Institute for Experimental Cancer Research said if he was asked the question, are we winning right now the war on cancer, he would say no, flat out no. Now, the most concerning part, because for years I've been talking about my concerns that if and when we really get to, and some people, a lot of people who believe that there's a lot of conspiracy here, believe that there's already a broad stroke cure for cancer, but that it has been covered up and it's kind of a conspiratorial thing. I have not participated in that. What I have participated in saying is that I believe because cancer is such a huge industry, that it wouldn't surprise me at all why corporate interests might want to delay or prevent a blanket cure for cancer, if such a thing would ever be possible, from being developed, because so much money is being made off of treating and sometimes curing cancer.
Right. Yeah. I don't really subscribe to the conspiracy theory, but I will say that I do believe that there probably is, for most forms of cancer, a pretty simple solution out there somewhere that either we have yet to discover or we have yet to develop on. I don't know.
Natan, what's your thought about this? It's not a conspiratorial point of view, but just kind of like a very pro, corporate power will supersede all point of view.
I disagree that that will cause the profit motive of keeping people in treatment is going to cause a cure to be covered up and not go to the public, because whatever pharmaceutical company finds a cure for any cancer is going to make a killing off of that. And certainly if people keep getting cancer, which will happen unless we start preventing cancer, there's going to keep being a market for the cure.
But the thing is, hold on a second. Let's talk about that for a second.
It's not just the pharmaceuticals.
Let's talk about that for a second. So basically what you're saying is the one that will put that cure out is going to make a killing at the expense of many others starting to reduce their incomes. This is like just asking how, when you talk about investment philosophy, do you want a 50% chance of never losing more than 15% in a year? Or do you want, a 90% chance of losing everything, but you've got that small chance that you'll multiply your earnings by 100, right? If all the companies together say, well, listen, we don't know which one of us is going to come up with a cure, so let's just keep people in treatment and all make money. I don't know. That doesn't sound crazy.
I don't think that's at all in the ballpark of the reason why we haven't seen better cures. I think the simple reason is that there's not a political will to put the money in for the research. The government needs to put a lot of money. If you take just a small fraction of what we're spending on unnecessary defense, for example, into cancer research, you're going to see the type of development that we were hoping we were going to get by now.
The last thought on this, Louis, another thing that came out of this World Oncology Forum is that now we are starting to see a huge financial divide in terms of access to resources and treatment. Case in point, the divide is such that in Canada, almost 90% of children with leukemia can hope to survive, while in poor countries of the world, 90% of children with leukemia are expected to die. Very clear issue of when treatment does exist, access to it based on inequality is leading to drastically different outcomes.
Right.
All right. No disagreement there. I think any of us could have guessed that.
Right.
Hey, Louis, would robots serving fast food affect you in any way?
Me personally, no, because I don't eat fast food.
Oh, okay. What about the idea of robots preparing food in general? Let's say it went beyond fast food to regular restaurants.
I don't like it, but at the same time, I guess I would need to see it firsthand to make any sort of final judgment.
Well, startup companies are scrambling to develop these humanoid-style robots that would be used for potentially for fast food, as this individual prototype drawing image thing that we have here on our screens shows, a burger flipper. There's a startup firm called Silicon Valley Robotics, which represents 40 organizations, and they're reporting a boom in robotic startups. Or rather, this is a company that reports on startups. They're saying the robotic startups are blowing up. There's one company called Momentum Machines, which is founded by San Francisco's Lemnos Labs. It's developed a robot designed to take the place of humans in burger restaurants. I agree with you. Since I don't go to these restaurants, I don't really care. However, this is almost like food building. It's almost like building a puzzle. Put patty down, flip patty after 2 minutes, put on bun type of thing. I don't know that this type of machine would be as effective in a restaurant that is not fast food, where food is prepared in a different way, right? I don't know
that's exactly it.
I don't know if it'll work.
Basically, in a McDonald's, people are working on basically an assembly line.
It's essentially an assembly line.
Everything is timed to avoid contamination and food poisoning, and so I guess when you have a robot doing it, you're actually decreasing your risk of illness for your patrons if it works properly.
Right. Would it, if let's say they develop one that could work in regular restaurants, would it bother you?
Yeah, I don't like that.
You want people preparing your food.
You know, I think we're so far away from that technology for that to work in a fine dining setting.
All right, well, there it is. Louis weighing in on fine dining preferences. I think you've made your points very clear.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go to your voicemail, but before that, 4 new stations airing the David Pakman Show I want to say hello to. On the radio side, KZYX in Philo, California, and WACC down the road from us in Enfield, Connecticut. On television, Tracy Community Channel 26 in Tracy, California. And this is exciting, Louis. Channel North TV in Whangarei, Northland in New Zealand, our first New Zealand TV affiliate. What do you think?
It's great.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Let's go to your voicemails here. Our voicemail line is open 24 hours a day, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail about our topic, can men and women really be friends? A new study says no, they can't.
Hi, David. This is Elka in Fort Wayne. I just wanted to call and comment on the study that you talked about in Thursday's show regarding friendships between men and women. I wasn't surprised by the results of that study. I think it's interesting how men and women view relationships. I think there are a couple things going on with that study, the results of that study. First of all, women just tend to be better at friendships, platonic friendships, nurturing friendships, being able to make distinctions, you know, in terms of people's roles in their lives, whether someone is a friend, whether someone is more than a friend, whether someone, you know, whatever that role that someone is taking on.
All right, what do you think about that? Is part of the reason why this discrepancy comes up, where men seem to think the woman in the friendship is attracted to them, where the woman just sees them as a friend, is it because women are better at the roles, or is it because of something else?
I'm not sure. It's hard for me to say. Is it possible that women are better at prioritizing things like that? Perhaps, yeah.
All right. We know you've been involved in a number of situations involving nebulous friend zones and a number of different complications.
Maybe.
It would be interesting to see some of those written out in some kind of journal form.
I don't know.
Let me just say one thing about this.
Yeah.
It seems to me like this study is not going to shed any light on the question that this person is asking in the voicemail. It seems like in this study, it's impossible to distinguish between our cultural realities in the West and in the United States and what is actually a male-female difference. So you would have to look at cultures all across the world to really figure that out.
All right. Well, that is certainly something we will continue to look into. Also, I must say, one of the issues with the study some people are pointing out is that it seems to focus really on college and just post-college age people, which may be drastically skewing these results as well.
Could be.
I mean, certainly, Louis, you have many platonic relationships with women.
I do.
And I would call them strong relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
So, anything's possible. On today's bonus show, mega church pastor Beaten to death with a guitar. Incredible story. And also, the Obama campaign receiving a donation from Osama bin Laden. What's that all about? Get the bonus show. If you don't get it, davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up, and then you'll get the bonus show. I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff, Louis.
Very simple.
Also, we will talk about the latest with Benghazi, so check that out. Otherwise, see you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.